Welcome to Headline Busters, brought to you by The Point. I'm Li Qiuyuan, sitting in for Liu Xin. In this series, I dissect stories that are making headlines around the world and talk to my guests to compensate for the missing pieces of the puzzle. So join us in real time by sending us your comments or questions via the CGTN page, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, or Weibo. And if you're watching this live on the CGTN app, email us at thepointwithlx@cgtn.com. Let me know what you think, and when I just read out your comments. We start our live streaming every Friday at 11 a.m. Beijing time. Do get in touch. And this week, we're unraveling the web of coronavirus lies 3 U.S. politicians have been submitting. Their mission? To deflect blame for the Trump administration's mishandling of the outbreak. And their target? China. But why? Over 80,000 Americans have lost their lives to the virus so far, with over 1.4 million infected. The U.S. economy is in freefall. Unemployment is hitting record highs, and Americans are understandably upset. Now, somebody's got to take the fall, and Trump is bound and determined it's not going to be him. But let's now look at the facts. Months were squandered between January 21st, when the U.S. reported what was at the time thought to be its first case of coronavirus, and March 13th, when Trump declared a national emergency and started talking or taking steps to fight the virus domestically. Now, people are misled, and Trump assured Americans the virus would miraculously go away. But when it didn't, and the U.S. death toll started to rise, Trump and his team needed a new tactic. They started using the terms China virus and Wuhan virus. And that was just the beginning of the administration's Blame China campaign. Now, to anyone who has been paying attention, the truth is clear. And yet the conspiracy theories, lies, and misinformation persist. Now, we hate to sound like a broken record and keep talking about this, but as long as these lies proliferate, we'll be here to bust them. So today, we'll look at a few of the most outlandish theories coming from Peter Navarro, Mike Pompeo, and Donald Trump himself. First, let's be clear. Navarro, Trump's trade advisor, has never liked China. So this period of angst in the U.S. gives him fertile ground to spread his China conspiracies. Now, there have been so many already, but just take a look at the latest.
President Trump built the most powerful and beautiful economy in the world in 3 years. Yep. The Chinese Communist Party took it down in 60 days.
The U.S. economy is indeed suffering, and the unemployment rate has soared to 14.7%, the worst since the Great Depression. The Q1 GDP shrank by 4.8%, the biggest plunge since the worst of the 2008 financial crisis. But it's suffering because of how the crisis was mishandled within the U.S., not because of China. And to say China is to blame is really overestimating China's abilities here. I mean, who would hatch a plot to attack the world with a virus and risk their own people's safety? And it's not like Navarro is some lone wolf here. His comments echo the recently leaked memo circulating among Republican senatorial candidates that explicitly encourages candidates to attack China. Now, while the origin of the virus remains unclear, one thing is crystal clear. Navarro is avoiding the U.S. government's own mishandling. It's also worth mentioning that Trump didn't even build the beautiful economy Navarro describes. He inherited its trends. The job growth and decline in the unemployment rate both held steady during the Obama years. And Trump thought he could ride the good economy right on into his second term, but now it looks like that won't be so easy anymore. Now, if the Trump administration had started testing earlier, recommended social distancing earlier, and an honest discussion happened earlier with American people, the U.S. would be in a very different place. And next, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, America's top diplomat. Now, his conspiracy of choice revolves around the stubborn Wuhan lab theory, and that China created the virus in a lab or it escaped from a lab. Doesn't matter. He has, quote, strong evidence. Let's hear it.
I can tell you that there is a significant amount of evidence that this came from that laboratory in Wuhan. But the best experts so far seem to think it was man-made. I have no reason to disbelieve that at this point.
It's embarrassing, yes, but it's also dangerous. The lab theory has been shut down by scientists around the world, the WHO, and even by the top U.S. intelligence agency when it released a statement that states it concurs with the scientific consensus that the COVID-19 virus was not man-made or genetically modified. And putting aside how Chinese feel about Pompeo these days, even the American media can't help but critique Pompeo's performance in their headlines. So when you fight against science, and when your own people say, we know how badly you want this to be true, but no, you're wrong, you see how desperate the situation has become. And of course, there's Trump himself. Now, it's hard to keep track of all the lies he's spread since taking office. One recent estimate says that as of early April, Trump had told 23.3 lies per day in 2020. And since the first case of COVID-19 was reported in the U.S., there's been a 0.5 lie increase. And that's compared to 1 or 2 little lies most people tell every day. But these aren't little lies, are they? Trump is not most people. He is the president of the United States. Suggesting Americans swallow disinfectant to treat the virus, telling Americans the virus would miraculously disappear by April, calling COVID-19 the China virus, telling a Chinese-American journalist not to ask him about the rising virus deaths in the U.S., but to ask China. The lies are not only immoral, but they have also cost American jobs and lives. Now, Trump and his aides show no sign of stopping, and in the meantime, Americans are dying every day. This is the price of tampering with the truth and gambling with people's lives. And we'll take a quick break now. When we come back, I'll talk to my guests about why the COVID-19 conspiracy theories persist and the consequences of it all. Do stick around.
I am not happy. I am upset because of the coronavirus. I can't go to school. I can't see my friends. We should use our strength, power, determination, and courage all together to fight with this common enemy, coronavirus. I have this common sense. Why don't you? I'm only 7 years old. I understand it, but why do some adults don't get it?
现在是通过下半场要开始准备加入讨论。Hello, Brandon. The second half is about the guest discussion. Thank you very much.
My name's Anna and I'm 7 years old. This is my brother William and he's 4 years old. I was born in Hong Kong. I live in Hong Kong. Coronavirus is like SARS's cousin, but more powerful than SARS because it can spread so quickly through the droplets. It can spread through coughing, sneezing, talking, touching, and even breathing. It can attack your lungs and your immune system. If you got the virus, you may have fever, diarrhea, sneezing, and breathing problems.
麻烦您数个数字或者说个话，我来测试您的声音。
王聪老师您好，
数字是吧？2、3。
我是今天的代班主持人李秋元，我们试一下声音，您能听见我说话吗？王聪老师您好。
您好，听得见。
哦，没问题，好的好的。You sound great. OK， 谢谢。Please stand by for us. 高老师您好，我是李秋元，我是今天
你好，李老师，你好，我可以听到你的声音，谢谢你。
很好，很棒。You sound great too. 谢谢。好，那我们一会儿开始，谢谢。Hey Brandon. It's Lee in the Beijing studio. I'm doing great, thank you. Just testing our connection here. Do you got me? Do I sound alright to you?
Great.
Good. You sound great too.
The world's most famous mouse and duck have returned to Shanghai Disneyland in a slightly different way.
Waving hello from afar is pretty much all you can do since close-up photos and interactions are suspended during the initial phase of reopening.
That's hardly the only change you'll notice. ID checks, temperature screenings, all customers need to show their health status QR codes.
The park's policy is face masks at all time while you play. Yes, in this way you cannot see each other's smiles, but better safe than sorry.
The majority of Chinese people have been dealing with these measures for most of the year. Social distancing is practiced in the cafeteria. on queues, and even on rides.
This is our first time in Shanghai. We knew this place would reopen, so we booked our tickets online. It wasn't hard to buy.
Disney said during the initial reopening, the park will operate at less than 30% tourist capacity. For a place known for its crowds, this is something brand new and necessary, according to Disney officials who stressed the importance of health safety.
While most attractions are open, some interactive experiences, such as children's play areas and theater shows, will remain closed.
The iconic nighttime spectaculars will not be presented at the Enchanted Storybook Castle, since the park is closing early at 7 p.m. Nevertheless, you can still wave goodbye to the beloved Donald Duck. 杨成熙 CGTN 上海。
Welcome back to Headline Buster.
Today we're talking about
the
the
persistent
conspiracy theories surrounding
COVID-19.
Now joining us
are
are
Mr. Victor Gao, Vice President, Center for China and Globalization in Beijing, and Mr. Wang Song, Chief Reporter from the Global Times, also joining us in Beijing. And last but not least, Brandon Blackburn, President of Grasshopper Strategies, joining us in Philadelphia. Great to see you all, gentlemen. So why don't we start with Brandon? Since these conspiracy theories started in the U.S. Those theories or misinformation I mentioned earlier in the first half, they are not new. They've been circulating for a while now. But we've got more and more evidence coming out contradicting these claims, especially those surrounding the lab theory. But why do they still persist? What do you think is happening there in the States?
Well, we have a number of different things going on. So let me start where we're going to pretend we're talking about a fact for a moment. The lab theory. Every science center in the world has basically said there is no evidence that this virus was man-made or genetically engineered. Here's the problem with actually getting rid of the lab theory. That is only half of the accusation. The other half of the accusation that gives just this very bare minimum glimmer of hope for those that still believe this can go with the idea that it can still be a lab accident, because there is a lab in Wuhan that handles infectious diseases, just like there are labs in the United States that handle things like Ebola or remaining strains of the Spanish flu from the 1918. And there can be, in theory, a breach at one of these labs that would release a naturally created virus into the public. And so the 33% of Americans that still believe in the lab theory, most of them think it's a lab accident, not necessarily genetically engineered. The problem here is that 33% of Americans are holding on to this because the Secretary of State is going on television and saying, I know things, but I'm not really going to tell the public, and I'm going to just intimate, I'm going to say vague things that are all very, very dark and very accusatory to China. The President of the United States is doing exactly the same thing. Every day on television, every day in the White House press corps, every day on Twitter, he's saying things that are vaguely threatening, vaguely insinuating all sorts of conspiracy theories, from China to Obama to Biden to Jeff Bezos. The Trump administration traffics routinely in conspiracy theories. And the problem is that every once in a while, they wrap those theories around the possibility of a glimmer of truth just enough that people buy it hook, line, and sinker.
You mentioned this number 33%. I mean, there was a point where this lab theory was considered fringe. Few people believed it, thought it was too far-fetched. And now we've got 33% Americans believing that this originated in a lab. I mean, that's just shocking to us. Victor, when you're hearing about this, the factors that allow something so far-fetched to go mainstream, the administration there made a role there.
Well, first of all, it really pains me to see that the United States government, the top officials, are not doing what they are supposed to do to fight against the coronavirus, but really wasting their time in all kinds of conspiracy theories. Secondly, these conspiracy theories are not going to help the Americans fight against the coronavirus. The coronavirus is the common enemy of the United States, of the Chinese, of everyone else in the world. So long as if you are still a human being, you should look at the coronavirus as the common enemy. Now, further, I think the Chinese people, together with people in all the other countries, share this desire to know the real truth about the coronavirus, this will require a very scientific and thorough investigation into how this coronavirus spread. And I think more and more evidence seems to surface to indicate that this COVID-19 as a public health problem existed in the United States as early as in January 2020, or even earlier in December, if not even in November 2019. Scientific researchers in Japan already indicated that as early as in July and August 2019, there were already incidences like COVID-19. Therefore, I think the real thorough investigation into the real origin of the COVID-19 virus need to be done on a global basis, including, for example, the closure of Fort Detrick military lab in July 2019, and the very strange vaping incidents in the United States being accused, linked onto the e-cigarette, for example. And I think without doing all this thorough investigation, we really would not be able to trace the coronavirus to its real origin. Now, as far as China is concerned, there are no skeletons in the Chinese closet. China can be very, very open and transparent as to the exact chronology of what happened about this COVID-19 in Wuhan in December 2019. So I think there are still very high-ranking officials in the United States, including the President of the United States, and very unfortunately, this Secretary of State, who doesn't seem to be doing the job of Secretary of State, who probably enjoys doubling up as the head of CIA, running a spy agency, for example. This is the worst thing you can do to run the State Department of the United States. Come on, Pompeo, be the top diplomat of the United States, promote understanding and mutual assistance, rather than, for example, try to thrive yourself on conspiracy theories. Even for the intelligence, you need to be honest and have a high level of integrity. You cannot really dump all these vile onto the intelligence agency in the United States. And you are very much contradicted by the intelligence agencies of the United States and in many other countries in the world. So we need to be realistic. I hope Pompeo will probably no longer be the top diplomat of the United States. And maybe if he still wants it, he can run a spy agency or conspiracy agency.
Mr. Wang, before I get to you, we're going to need to take a short break here to fix some technical problems. So do stay with us. We'll be right back.
I am not happy. I am upset because of the coronavirus. I can't go to school. I can't see my friends. We should use our strength, power, determination, and courage all together to fight with this common enemy, coronavirus. I have this common sense. Why don't you? I'm only 7 years old. I understand it, but why do some adults don't get it? My name's Anna and I'm 7 years old. This is my brother William and he's 4 years old. I was born in Hong Kong. I live in Hong Kong. Coronavirus is like SARS's cousin, but more powerful than SARS because it can spread so quickly through the droplets. It can spread through coughing, sneezing, talking, touching, and even breathing. It can attack your lungs and your immune system. If you got the virus, you may have fever, diarrhea, and coughing, sneezing, and breathing problem. Scientists found out there are 3 types of corona members. There are A, B, and C. But scientists have still not figured out where the virus came from. Let's leave the scientists to solve this puzzle. The virus is our common enemy. It is beyond any country, any race, and any bias, and any politics. We are global citizens. Everyone is connected around the world. Everyone has a responsibility to beat the virus. It is a big challenge to all of us as human beings. Only when all of us are united and work together can we overcome this crisis.
And welcome back to Headline Buster. So, Mr. Wansel, let me go to you now. These conspiracy theories, misinformation, your thoughts on it? I mean, they're not helping the US fighting the virus, clearly. They're not saving lives, but they're helping in the elections for Trump.
Well, I don't know if that helps because the judge is still out. The election is not over. I mean, the Brandon and Victor covered the facts of those claims pretty well. I want to judge, let's say for 1 second that this is a campaign strategy by the Trump administration ahead of the election. But even then, that is failed miserably. I mean, you look at this, I will give you one example. Yesterday, during an interview with Fox News, Trump threatened to cut off the entire relationship between China and the United States. I mean, no US president has ever said something like that. This is the most consequential bilateral relationship in the world. And what happens? Nothing. In the Wall Street, the stocks barely moved. In China, no response. I was talking to some government advisors yesterday. They say that is a joke that doesn't even require a warrant a response. What does that say about the integrity of the President of the United States, the integrity of the presidency of the United States, and furthermore, the United States? So we can clearly see their conspiracy theories, this campaign, smear campaign against China, has taken a toll on the U.S. Influence, on the U.S. Image globally. I mean, you know, you can ask anybody, the men on the streets or people, international experts. They know what's going on in Washington, and what they're doing is not helping the fight against COVID-19. The election, we don't know about that yet, but the United States image globally. This strategy is also driven not only by election, but this long-term concern about China's rise and the United States falling status globally. But also, this is not helping that cause. So I think from whichever angle we're looking at this campaign, it is definitely not helping the United States. And, you know, we still have people dying in the United States. There are 85,000 people dead. And, you know, the economy is in the tanks. It's expected to shrink by Congress, from White House. Congress just passed, the House of Representatives just passed a bill, a stimulus bill, but this Republicans on the Senate just said that will be dead on arrival. That's partisanship. So it's not helping the fight. It's not helping the U.S. economy. It's not helping their global status.
Right. The reason I mentioned the election is this: we don't know how it's going to turn out yet, but we do have some data to show to our viewers now. Despite soaring unemployment rate, Donald Trump's overall approval rating now hit a high in the latest Gallup poll released at the beginning of this month. That's May. So 49% of respondents, and we're talking about a little over 1,000 adults from all over 50 states. It might not represent a full picture, but it does tell something. The 49% of the respondents approve Trump handling his job as president. 47% disapproved. And when specifically asked about how he handled the coronavirus crisis, 50% approved and 48% disapproved. I mean, that's a shockingly high approval rating to me. And let me just put things to our viewers, into perspective to our viewers. Up to date, the United States has over 1.4 million cases. The country has the most cases, most deaths from COVID-19 of any nations in the world. It's not doing a great job there. And look at China. China has 1.4 billion people, 4 times the population of the United States, and it managed to contain the coronavirus case at just over 84,000. So 1.4 million in the US, 84,000 in China. No matter whether you like the way China handled the crisis or not, it's doing a good job. It's doing a better job in the United States. That's just fact. And so people who are watching what's unfolding there in the United States, the containment, is a total failure. And to me, the Blame China campaign is working magic for Trump. I mean, simple as that. Just blame China and everything will be fine. And he's still got his high rating. Victor.
No, I think, first of all, I never have full and complete trust in any poll. And secondly, right now, the danger in the United States is that the president representing the presidency of the United States is really going all out in the wrong direction. Now, I would say in any country, if the head of the state really screams out loud something, he will have some impact on the people. You know, whether these people are highly intelligent or whether these people are very much partisan in nature, etc., it doesn't matter. Now, I would say for any head of state of any country in the world, he or she will get up to about 50%, if not more, of popular support, especially in a time of emergency, in a time of national survivability, for example. So I'm not very much intrigued by this particular poll. I would say the numbers are numbers, the facts are facts, and the American people are people of decency and dignity. By the end of the day, they will wake up to the harsh reality. They will know someone is failing in the job of organizing this fight against the coronavirus, and someone eventually has the blood on his hand for so many deaths and so many infections, and then for such a high level of scare in the society, and then for the inability to fight off the coronavirus on the one hand, and very successfully and safely relaunch the country into opened up, resurrected operations. So I would say no matter how far you go out on a limb and try to accuse in all directions, for example, by the end of the day, the truth will emerge, and the American people, with such dignity that I admire, with such amount of decency, with such amount of heartwarming spirit, for example, will be able to make their own decision as to whether the United States deserves a better president for the next 4 years. And for the moment, I'm afraid the United States is in a damned situation, because if Trump wins, it is damned. If Trump loses, it is damned. I think if Trump does lose the presidential election, and in his case, re-election, then he will kick and scream and never give up. And then the United States may eventually degenerate into chaos and high level of disorder. And then the American people will suffer. If he wins, then the United States will continue on this downward spiral. And eventually the ultimate victims will be the American people. I feel so sorry for the American people, and I hope they will make the right, bold decision in November.
Now we're getting some comments from our viewers who are watching us online. Let's take a look at this. This is from YouTube. So Sentinel says US is determined to maintain the top spot in the world, and it's convinced that the way to maintain the top position is to keep China down. Brandon, your thoughts on this?
I think that this highlights a pretty common belief that the United States and many of its leaders, from Trump to many other folks that were much more reasonable before Trump, started to believe that it was an or option. It was the U.S. was on top or China was on top. There were many leaders that were also, for the last 30 years, really saying that, look, we can grow together, we can develop together. What I want to highlight, though, is in the current situation, I think we're almost giving President Trump a little too much credit if we actually think he cares about how the United States is seen around the world. All he cares about is his domestic audience. He basically, China, if he could make up a country that he could yell about every single day, he would yell about that country. He would yell about Fredonia if he thought it would rile up his base and make him look strong to the people that like bullying tactics. And so he does have a grudge against China. Many of his advisors have decades-long anti-China stances. But President Trump and the explosion of conspiracy theory around his presidency, particularly in the last few weeks, is very specifically about domestic politics. and it's starting to work. You've noted that the Gallup poll has his approval rating going up, even as we have 85,000 people in the United States that have died, an unimaginable number even just a month ago when President Trump himself said, you know, if I hadn't done anything, we might have had 50 or 100,000 people die, but because I did this, it's going to be over right away. And now we have 85,000. We are on our way to crossing 100,000 deaths in the next couple of weeks, most likely. And we see people taking to the streets. We see people carrying signs saying coronavirus is a hoax. We see people challenging stay-at-home orders in court, saying that the president has told us that the rest of the government is taking away our freedoms. This is a president that is determined to win by ripping apart the fabric of the United States. And if he can blame anyone to get there, be it China, be it Vice President Biden, be it former President Obama, be it the guy on the corner that he just doesn't like the look of, be it a governor of a state, he will do it. And China in this position is really beyond any factual blame or factual villainism. And I'm not calling China a villain, but I'm saying it doesn't really matter if there's facts. President Trump knows it's a country that is a wedge issue with his base, and he will just heap any blame he possibly can at China. And all we can hope is that the leaders that we have in the future can repair this relationship, because it's not going to get repaired in the next couple of months.
And this leaked memo we earlier mentioned, circulating among Republican senatorial candidates, that explicitly encourages candidates to attack China. I mean, how far deep, how well planned is this Blame China campaign then?
It doesn't have to be very well planned. It just has to be a plan, right? This leaked memo, all it said was blame China. It didn't give any facts. It didn't give any go into the labs conspiracy theory. It didn't say talk about the jobs, talk about globalism. It didn't say anything about it. It said literally just don't bother pretending to defend Trump. That means you're going to be on the defensive. Go on the offensive and say the words China and as many bad things as possible in that sentence, and that will help you in the polls. That's what the strategy was. This doesn't have to be a big plan. It doesn't have to be a big conspiracy theory. It is literally bullyism, like a child would do on a playground, where they say, hey, you go hit that kid in the face, and then everybody will think we're awesome. And that's what we're doing right now. It's that level of planning. This is, unfortunately, we're giving them too much credit if we think it is a much more thought out conspiracy theory based, let's get everybody on the same page. It's literally not. It's the pages blame China. Don't let anybody yell at Trump. That's how we went.
And some analysts is saying that why this Blame China campaign is working is because it plays into the mindset of a lot of Americans that if China is succeeding, it must be cheating. I mean, Mr. Wang Song, your thoughts on this? Do you agree with this, or what? Give it leverage?
Well, agree. I am afraid not. But I just want to add to what Brandon said there. Also the comment this social media user said. This theory that in order for the United States to maintain its dominance is to kicking down China is zero-sum game. That's wrong. However, having said that, the competition between China and the United States will persist for years to come, even decades to come. But there's a ways to compete fairly and fairly. So I think the theory that in order to kicking down China, we have to go all out, and doesn't matter how dirty the tricks are, is completely wrong. And also, again, it does not help the United States cause to even say compete with China. The more the United States is spitting out these conspiracy theories, these accusations, the more it sounds like the United States is already falling. From what Trump has been saying, from what Republican senators have been saying, they're acting as a failed state, not the world superpower. So that already says a lot about that. And I don't really know that if go on and attack China, all this would drive anything concrete. For example, they're suing China for punitive damage for the so-called mishandling of the coronavirus pandemic. But nobody, at the end of the day, nobody with the right mind would think that China will pay a single penny. China would help the world's fight against the pandemic. However, to think that China will pay a single penny in punitive terms, that is complete illusion. And the reason they're still pushing for this, because that is fear-mongering, that will drive headlines, that will help the ignorant quarters of the United States, not the intelligence, not the decent quarters of the United States. And in election season, those are the matter. You know, you have to be loud. You don't have to be correct. You don't have to be right. You just have to be loud and fear-mongering. So I guess within the current political environment in the United States, there a strategy, election strategy, but overall they're hurting the United States, the economy, and most of all, the American people.
We have so much to talk about, but we're running out of time. But I do want to end this on a positive note, because that's what I think is most needed right now. So Brandon, I'll give you the final remark here. What do you think is needed for cooperation to happen here?
Short term, I'm going to actually say that we have to look beyond our leaders. We have to look to forums to actually engage and discuss. Now, that can be informal forums like this in a media situation, but it can also be remembering that we have an interconnected world that allows us to reach out and talk and learn about each other's cultures, learn about the struggles that are going on inside China, the struggles that are going on inside the United States, the struggles that are going on around the world. I don't mean to be overly idealistic, but we need to create people-to-people connections that keep us strong enough to be able to survive the type of nationalistic, local, chaotic politics that are running the United States. And we can only hope that the rest of the world can be patient, while I hope the United States find different leadership that actually starts engaging in a responsible and constructive manner to continue global trade, global peace, and interactive and engagement, so we can all develop together. But in the short term, it's got to start with us. We've got to be a little bit calmer. We've got to avoid rising to the bait every time President Trump gets to Twitter. We've got to avoid rising to the bait every time Secretary of State Pompeo says something outrageous. We've got to find people that we can connect with one-on-one to discover for ourselves that we have more in common than what divides us.
We'll leave it like that. Thank you very much, Brandon. That's Brandon Blackburn-Dwyer joining us from Philadelphia, Mr. Victor Gao, and Mr. Wang Sun joining us in Beijing. Thank you all for our analysis and perspectives. And that's going to do it for this edition of Headline Busters. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.